On today's episode of the Locked On the Louisville podcast, we are going to be discussing Dee Wiggins, George Washington III, and more. So, with that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On the Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I'd like to take this time to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. At this time, I want to say thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On the Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. A little bit of a mixed bag to discuss today, football, basketball, recruiting, and a mailbag. We'll start out by talking about some unfortunate news. Louisville wide receiver Dee Wiggins will miss the remainder of the football season after a toe injury in which he had surgery on. Scott Satterfield announced on Tuesday. We'll also discuss four-star 2023 combo guard George Washington III cutting his list to 5 with the Cardinals making that cut. And then, as I just alluded to, the final segment will be dedicated to the weekly mailbag. A scheduling note before we talk about Dee Wiggins. I know that I had planned for today to talk about the spread against South Florida, how good the Bulls are, and et cetera. But we had some news pop up, obviously, with the Dee Wiggins injury and George Washington III cutting his list. So we'll dive into South Florida preview starting tomorrow and obviously through the Friday episode of the show. So, so on Tuesday, during his weekly press conference, Louisville head coach Scott Satterfield announced to the media that wide receiver Dee Wiggins would miss the remainder of the college football season after sustaining a toe injury in the game against Florida State, and he underwent season-ending surgery since then. So, a pretty big loss for the Louisville wide receiving core. I want to talk about what it means, from an individual standpoint, and also what it means from a collective standpoint in discussing the position as a whole. Obviously, I think Dee Wiggins just came off of his best game as a Louisville Cardinal. Had a couple of big catches, especially in the first half before he went down against Florida State. With Malik Cunningham spreading the ball out more, Dee Wiggins was, the one of the main guys that were getting more targets. He is currently 4th on the team in the receiving charts, 4 receptions for 67 yards, 16.8 yards per reception, had a 23-yard catch as his season long. But only one receiver has a receiving touchdown this season. That is Travion Cooley. Or I guess you could say, quote-unquote receiver. I know Travion Cooley is a running back. But statistically speaking, obviously it doesn't seem like this is too big of a loss when you just look at statistics and you think, oh, well, he only has 4 catches for 67 yards. Well, I would definitely recommend to those that are thinking that way to do not think that way. Number one, there's a couple of ways you need to look at this. Number one, Louisville is just now starting to spread the passing attack around. Obviously, we're only 3 games in. That first game against Syracuse, Tyler Hudson really was the only one getting a significant amount of targets. Central Florida offensively, we were struggling there as well. Florida State, the offense looked a little bit better than the first 2 weeks, but still nowhere near the offensive potential. I think the team is 69th in total offense, is what I read on Twitter. So if I'm wrong on that, blame Twitter. But this is a big loss. I think that Dee Wiggins, being Justin Marshall's replacement, I'm not saying that he would have been a 1,000-yard receiver, but I think having his veteran leadership, having his Power 5 experience, to go throughout the season, and with him being one of the only projected players with his size, it's hard to say that this injury is not going to have a big impact on the wide receiver position group. Simply from the fact that I think that, he was one of the guys that impressed in fall camp. He was a listed starter, so you're losing one of your starting wide receivers, and that's something that's tough to deal with, right? I think that, you could look at this and say, well, he only has 4 catches, so can't they just replicate that, production with a different receiver? Well, that brings me to my next point, and that is probably the bigger concern, is the fact that Louisville already came into the season without a ton of numbers in the position group. Obviously, Devon Mortimer did not make it to campus. And now with Dee Wiggins out, you only have, I think, under 8 scholarship wide receivers. It might be 7 now. You've got Tyler Hudson, Amari Huggins-Bruce, Braden Smith, and then you have some of the unproven guys like Jaelin Carter, Chance Morrow, Chris Bell, so on and so forth. So you're kind of not necessarily running out of options, but your depth is really, really wearing thin to the point now where you're like, you can't really afford to lose another receiver. You couldn't afford to do so then. You definitely can't afford to do so now. So what does this mean? What are the implications for the future after this injury? Well, I think that this could be the opportunity arising for true freshman wide receiver Chris Bell, the 6'2" receiver from the state of Mississippi. Showed throughout the offseason and even in fall camp, had some moments of promise. He seems like the, clear maybe replacement. And then you have Jaelin Carter, the former walk-on that was just awarded a full-ride scholarship, the local product out of Manual High School, transferred from Eastern Kentucky before last season. And you also have a 6'6" wide receiver in Chance Morrow as well. So those are the 3 options. Really, those are the only options that you can kind of roll with here. No, from a production standpoint, I don't think any of those 3 guys are going to come in and play big time roles. But now you lose like your big receiver in terms of height. So I wonder if this is going to be more so of a by committee approach where you see all 3 of those guys that I just mentioned get some snaps, or if you're going to see Louisville just continue to go smaller and run Tyler Hudson more on the boundary. And, allow Braden Smith and Amari Huggins-Bruce to occupy the slot and the other side of the field. That's kind of the question to have. But like I said, you really can't afford any injury. I wonder if this means that we'll see Marshawn Ford kind of being used more as a traditional wide receiver rather than just as an H-back or even a traditional tight end. I know going into last season, that was kind of one of the main focal points of interest, was that the team was going to try to use Marshawn Ford in a variety of different ways, kind of how Florida uses Kyle Pitts, Georgia uses Brock Bowers, so on and so forth. So I'm interested to see, what the coaching staff kind of has in mind for the position moving forward. But for an offense that, is predominantly based upon the run, I think right now it's accounting for 60% or so of the total plays, maybe. I need to take a look at that. Definitely over 50%. This is a rushing offense that it's an offense that is starting to come around and really start to set the tone at the line of scrimmage for the rushing attack. So I would imagine Louisville to continue to go back to its bread and butter and then use the rushing attack to set up the passing game. So you never know what the opportunities were going to look like for Dee Wiggins this season. I'm not going to say that because of the lack of production that this is not a large loss, because Louisville has a handful of smaller receivers that are more so shifty guys, not necessarily aerial threats. I know Tyler Hudson's in the 6'2" range, and then you have some unproven guys. But hey, the mantra now is next man up. And yeah, your depth is really being tested here. You're testing some of the unproven guys, one of them in Jaelin Carter that's been in the program a couple seasons now. See if he can try to put his stamp on his senior year. You also have 2 true freshmen that now, as it looked like they weren't going to get much time at all, one of, if not both, may see some significant snaps now. And I think that, honestly, in my opinion, there's one name that I'm really circling here that we're going to see here in the next couple of weeks, and I think that that's Chris Bell. Chris Bell is the guy that I mentioned as the true freshman on offense that's going to make the biggest impact. He doesn't have one single catch on the season thus far. I think that that's going to change in the weeks going forward because it has to. You have to have some substitutions in the wide receiving committee. And I think that pound for pound in terms of the direct relation to skill set, Chris Bell is probably the closest when it comes to, replicating the skill set that Dee Wiggins brings to the table. But still a big loss. Wiggins came to Louisville looking to try to reignite his career after kind of getting passed over a little on the depth chart down in Coral Gables. But now, after 3 games, you're pretty much obviously the season is over. It'll be interesting to see, what the future has for Wiggins. I think he has a year left. If he can apply for a medical red shirt, assuming he does want to utilize that, which would be solid to have him for next year. But regardless, I think that it is a tough loss. And Chris Bell, Chance Morrow, Jaelin Carter going to be the guys that get called upon, in my opinion, in the void. You're going to see guys like Hudson, Amari Huggins-Bruce, Braden Smith get targeted more. I'm interested to see if this means we'll see Josh Johnson. I'm not sure if Josh is hurt or not. I haven't heard his name. I'm not sure if this means that he's been kind of battling some injury, but I hadn't heard anything. Let's see. Yeah, I haven't really seen anything about Josh Johnson recently about injury, so I would assume that it's just a matter of depth chart proceedings. We'll see, Johnson having to probably step into like more of a slot role, and maybe they move Maury Huggins-Bruce, Braden Smith out more so to the boundary instead of using him in the slot. So we'll kind of see how that ends up working out. Like I said, I think that also another thing to focus on is I think that we're going to be using Marshawn Ford more so out in the boundary as well. So big loss that Louisville is going to have to figure out how to continue to stay healthy at the position and replicate that production. So I want to take this time now to transfer over into basketball talk, recruiting in specifics. George Washington III, 2023 4-star combo guard, cut his list to 5. The Cardinals made that list. We're going to talk about everything you need to know about that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. You're able to do so very, very easily. You can add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs the #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So moving on into the basketball recruiting segment of the show, 4-star combo guard George Washington III cut his list to 5. On Tuesday, the Cardinals made that list alongside of Virginia, Dayton, Michigan, and Wake Forest. It seemed like when it was announced that Washington would be releasing his top 5, you kind of had the feeling that Louisville was going to make the list. The Cardinals were very serious in his recruitment before he committed to Ohio State back in 2020. The team was 2021 maybe. Regardless, the team was very involved in his recruitment. They prioritized him a lot, albeit it was the former coaching staff under Chris Mack. But Washington was a big fan of the city, a big fan of the program. So it felt like when Louisville reached back out after Washington decommitted from Ohio State, that you felt like Louisville was going to make the cut, right? They ended up making the cut. Dayton is seemingly the presumed leader at this point. George's father is currently an assistant coach for the Dayton women's basketball program. It seems like there is a correlation, obviously, maybe with staying at home or home now. Washington's family has been one that's kind of moved around. Started out in Texas the past 2 seasons, played his high school ball at Christian Academy in Louisville, and now will be finishing his senior season up in Dayton playing for Chaminade Julienne. The 76th best player according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, ninth ranked shooting guard, second best in the state of Ohio. He's listed as a shooting guard. I think at the next level, he presents more to be, a combo guard playing, the one. And if he's not playing the one, he's a secondary ball handler. As I mentioned in the last show when we discussed Washington, is that I'm a big advocate for his game. And I don't necessarily look at the rankings here and think, okay, he's going to be a guy that may take a couple seasons to progress. And when he does, it might be at the back end of his career. I don't think that at all. I think that George Washington III is a baller. I've seen him play in person a handful of times over the past couple seasons. I've announced a couple games in which he's played, most notably in the 7th Region Tournament against Caleb Glenn's male Bulldogs last March. So I was able to see them to go head-to-head. And there would be nothing I would want more than to have two former Louisville high school stars playing for the University of Louisville. Obviously, Caleb Glenn, a native of the Derby City, but George Washington III did live here for an amount of time. He is a microwave scorer, can score at all 3 levels, a knockdown perimeter shooter, creates his own offense really, really smoothly off the dribble. And most notably, in my opinion, is showing that he can create for his teammates. And that is a big factor here that you have to really focus on when you talk about what he projects to be at the next level. He's a little bit undersized to be a shooting guard, maybe not the collegiate level, but definitely at the professional level at 6'2". I think that his game is more suited for playing the one, in a sense to where you're seeing him in ball handling duties and things of that nature. A serviceable defender, does a good job of reading defenses, jumping passing lanes, things of the nature. Needless to say, as I mentioned the last time we discussed George Washington III, look, I think he is going to be a tremendous college player, and I definitely would love that for the University of Louisville, for a team that's definitely going to be needing guard play after this season. He told On3 in an interview, one of the biggest things about them being Louisville, is with their new staff, and it's an amazing opportunity to come in and play for pros and for guys that have been there. It's a good situation, a great school with a great basketball legacy. So obviously it seems like Dayton is going to be tough to beat here. Virginia, Michigan, Wake Forest also in the mix. I really feel like if Louisville prioritizes George Washington III, if they put the full court press on him like they've done some other guys in this class, in the 2024 class, I think Louisville's going to be right into the mix up until signing day or whenever Washington decides to commit. Whether or not that's going to be enough to, sway Washington to commit, that's a different story. But I think that if Louisville wants to seriously be involved in this recruitment, that they are going to be seriously involved in this recruitment. I think that Washington has, a solid, foundation here in the Louisville. And what I mean by that is I kind of worded that wrong. He has a good feel for the university. He knows, he's familiar. There's a familiarity aspect of it. Maybe it's not his hometown, but he has lived here before, so he knows what to expect. It's not necessarily a mystery, but ultimately he knows this program. He's been around this program. He's visited this program. So that's something to focus on. I think that if Louisville wants to get involved, they definitely are going to be involved to the very end. So final segment of the show, we're going to transfer over into the weekly mailbag. We'll do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all of the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts. BetOnline is also your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports and events, including MLB, boxing, MMA, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So diving right on in to the weekly mailbag, there's a couple good questions, mainly football. First one up is probably what a lot of people are asking themselves. If Louisville does, in fact, lose to South Florida, does that mean Scott Satterfield will be fired before the next game against Boston College? I don't think so. Full transparency, I think that if a coaching change were to occur, I'm not saying it's going to occur, but if it were to occur, I think it would be at the end of the season, unless Louisville loses their next 5 to 6 games and they're really, really struggling. But then again, let's hope that it doesn't get to that point. I don't think that he gets fired after the South Florida game, as much as the fan base probably would wish he would be. There is a financial, factor to understand here, and that's that his buyout is pretty big at this moment. I'm not sure the exact number on that, but I think that it decreases sometime in December, so I'm not necessarily sure when this would take place, if it were to take place, but I really doubt it would be after the Week 4 matchup. So next question, do you feel nervous at all the fact that Louisville opens up a double-digit favorite over the South Florida Bulls? Kind of naturally, yes. Mainly because, South Florida just played Florida tough down in the swamp. And now Florida, in my opinion, is not a good football team whatsoever, unless they make a coaching change. And even then, it's kind of up in the air at this point. It is what it is. I expect Louisville to be a double-digit point favorite. But, yeah, it makes me nervous just because if Louisville loses, that makes this loss look just that much more worse, is the fact that this is a game that Louisville was definitely supposed to win. And going 1-3 is one thing. Going 1-3 to, two teams that you were favored to beat going into those games, that's a totally different story. So, keeping on right along, if you had the opportunity to take any of the top 2023 point guards or either of the top 2024 guards that Louisville was offered, who would you take and why for the 2023 class? Full transparency, I'm okay with reclassifications. It just seems like even though there are very few instances or pieces of evidence that show that reclassifications are actually successful, at least in year one. So I think that I would keep Elliot Cadeau and Boogie Fland in the 2024 class for recruiting, or so it's down between DJ and AJ Johnson. This is going to seem like, oh, Dalton, you're just saying this because Kentucky is favored for DJ. I am probably the biggest advocate for AJ Johnson out there, the current, my gosh, I can't speak. The younger brother of current Houston Rockets star Jaelin Green. I am a big Rockets fan, full disclosure. But I think that AJ's ceiling is one of the top 3 in this class. I think that, he has, extreme athleticism, a nuclear offensive skill set, just oozing with potential. I think that, when Johnson shows that he can add weight to his frame, he's kind of a little thin now, I think 165 pounds. Look, Johnson's going to be a phenom, and that's not, dissing DJ Wagner at all, because I would happily take either one and be on my way. Obviously, from a optical look, you would probably rather have DJ because of the optical look of it. But I think from a basketball standpoint, this is nothing against DJ. This is just more so how high I am on AJ Johnson's game. So I would probably go AJ Johnson. So, all right. Excuse me. All right. Continuing on into the next question. This goes back to the football side of things. Do you think that Pierce Clarkson would be a guy that starts year one for the Louisville Cardinals? I'm assuming that he does end up signing. I think that that's a fair question. If it came down to the guys on the roster right now, Evan Conley, Brock Dolman, and Caleb Johnson, I think that Pierce Clarkson would be the starter. No disrespect to any of those guys, but I think that that's kind of probably the vision that Scott Satterfield or whoever is going to be the next head coach, if Scott does not make it past this season, as the Louisville coach. I think that Pierce Clarkson probably will definitely be in that mix. I don't see a situation to where any of the guys in the current team in the current roster would beat him out. I think that the only thing that maybe would be a thing to focus on would maybe if they go with a 1-year grad transfer to allow Pierce Clarkson to not be thrown into the fire, so to speak, and allow him to learn the college offense, whoever's offense that is, and you'll be able to grow into it. And then by year 2, you're right there. So, like I said, talked about Dee Wiggins, George Washington III, and the weekly mailbag. Tomorrow's episode will be dedicated to starting the preview against the South Florida Bulls. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. You can find us on all streaming services, including YouTube and WHAS 11+. Now, do yourself a favor, make Locked On ACC your second listen. That podcast hosted by Candace Cooper, also Monday through Friday, doing the best job of covering the conference as a whole. But that's going to wrap up this Wednesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here